Hello Art 2 students. So for this demonstration, I just want to show you a little bit of what using the colored pencil looks like on the black paper. That way, if you do decide to use the black paper for your tessellation, you kind of have an understanding of what the finishing and coloring and shading and detail steps are going to look like. Now you remember, on this particular example, I used one of my white Jelly Roll pens to go over my pencil lines. I did try a couple of other colors. I do have a gold that will work, and the green here just does not quite suffice in my opinion. I have not been able to find other pens yet that will serve that same purpose, but I will kind of still keep an eye out for that. But like I was saying, the purpose of this video is just to show you what a couple different colors looks like on the black paper and sort of how the shading steps could potentially work. Now keep in mind, your design, your color, your use of color, all of that is completely up to you. So there's not really a right or a wrong way to finish these, but I'm just going to use some of the sort of lighter colors on this particular piece so that you can see. Now keep in mind the type of colored pencil that you use and the color colored pencil that you use will sort of affect the way that it goes onto the black paper. Dark colors do still show up though, so do not pick colors just because you're using black paper. If you want to use a certain color and you're not sure whether or not it will work on the black paper, just test it out first. There's lots of scraps of the black paper left over from cutting the pages down to a 9-inch square. So there's plenty of paper for you guys to practice on if you just are not quite sure of what a color is going to look like. So I'm just going to turn my page so that I can start here. Because as with anything, I definitely recommend starting sort of on a bigger space and working your way into the details. So like if I want to make this bird's body sort of this pink color, then I'm going to start on the body and then go to the wing and then to the details that are actually on the face. So right now what I'm doing is actually a value scale. So you'll see that as I get more toward the middle of the body, I'm still going to press down less and less. So you still can definitely see a difference there in value. It's just kind of almost an inverted value scale, because now instead of the part where I'm putting the most pressure being the darkest value, the part where I'm putting the most pressure is the lightest value. So you can choose to make sure that you pay attention to that. Like if you want to make sure that your highlights are what you are working on, and you will actually be shading kind of in the opposite method and style of typical shading. Or you can do more like what I'm doing and just use the value scale as a means of achieving depth and interest, not so much highlights and shadows. So right now I'm just kind of going around the eye, because the eye is not going to be that same color as the rest of the body. Still turning my page however often I need, so that I've got, once again, the tip of my pencil against the edge of my shape, so that I can continue to keep that shape nice and clean. Gonna go ahead and start in with my value scales. Remember, anytime you are working in value scales, especially if you have sort of a shape like one of these, you are not necessarily just going to go straight across with that value scale. As you can see, I am turning the page, I am turning my pencil, and I'm doing value scales in multiple directions that sort of overlap to create the shading and the depth that we see there. That is just like when we shaded spheres in the past. Any type of shading that we have done, you do not necessarily just all go in one direction unless you are specifically hatching. If you are just using the hatching technique with your shading, then yes, you will only go in one direction with all of that shading. Cross hatching, you would go in two directions. Modeling or blending, which is the type of shading that we typically do, you go in however many directions it takes to build up that value and those transitions in nice smooth layers. So as you can see, I'm just still working with those value scales, still working on that bigger area. Now, one thing that is interesting about shading on black is you can actually use a black colored pencil to help you get some of this transition even smoother. Like how we've done on white paper where you use a white colored pencil, you can do the exact same thing with a black colored pencil, sort of in the opposite direction there. So I'm going to actually go ahead and do part of the beak, because what I want to do on the wing is show you a bit of a different pink, sort of a darker pink, so that we can start to see how that would show up on the black. Now on the beak, I'm going to also use some white. So I'm using white and yellow on the beak, just like I would really if I was shading on white paper. It just looks a little bit different because the whole technique, the whole process is different. So still using multiple colors for details in here. And then I could use my white pen again to make that highlight and the nose highlight a little bit brighter. But what I want to do first is just show you some of the darker colors and even a little bit of how black works on the black paper. So now I've got my black colored pencil, and you can see I'm just going to go sort of on that crack area between the two parts of the beak, and I'm just going to shade exactly as if I were on white paper. So I'm still going to press down hardest where I want that darkest value with my black, but you can see now it brings a deeper black in there because the actual page itself is also black. And I could do the same thing here. And all that this is going to do really is smooth out that transition going back to black, because now I've got my pink and my black colored pencils sort of blending together just like they would on white paper to make a smoother transition than just going from pencil to paper. So still pressing down the most where I want it to be the darkest. And then as I go over those pink areas, pressing down less and less to smooth out that transition from one value to the next. Now, once again, that's not a necessary step. But if you are one of those people who does want to make sure that you have your entire shape colored in with a pencil, that can be a very good option to help you make sure that you still maintain a lot of depth there by having a full value range. So that's kind of a couple of options you have there. Now I'm going to show you a bit of a darker pink on the wing area. Scoot it down just a smidge so you can see better. And just as if I were shading on white paper, what I'm doing here is putting the darkest value of the pink in the corners and then getting lighter and lighter with the pink and then move toward the black. Remember, you can do it that way, or what you can also do in this particular case is focus on the black as being the shadows and work the opposite way, to where you would put the brightest color in the middle and fade into black on both ends. So there's a couple different ways to do it. I'll show you a couple of those ways. But now on this one, for instance, I could go in with my lighter pink in the middle, just like I would if I was on white paper, and fade that lighter pink into those areas where I have the darker pink. So I'm still creating basically the same type of shading as I normally would, to where it's lightest in the middle. Keep in mind you can also use white in there. So again, I'm just putting my darker gradient in, and I'm going to go over that with my lighter pink. Once again, focusing that lighter pink more toward the middle, and then transitioning into the darker pink as I get closer to the corner here. And then once again, transitioning into that darker pink as I move towards the bottom of that wing shape. Now remember, I can also use white in here to even brighten that space up a little bit more. And it would just be the same concept. I would put most of the white in the middle and less as I move out on either side to help that transition stay nice and smooth. Let me turn my page a little bit here. So once again, all of these shading and coloring demos are just to remind you primarily that it's up to you. Most of you have chosen to use white paper, probably just because that's kind of a more familiar paper color to use, and that's fine. But if you did choose the black paper, or you want to experiment with black paper, colored pencil is a very safe medium with which to do that, because you have a lot of control over the colored pencil, and it itself is a medium with which you are familiar, because we've used colored pencil a lot in previous art classes and some in Art 2 as well. So here I'm just going back in with that light pink again, transitioning into my darker pink on either side here. I can go in with my white once again toward the middle here to really even brighten up some of those highlights even more. Then I would have this last shape to do. I'm going to do it very much the same way. Constantly turning my page here. My time limit is coming right up on this particular video though, so I will pause the video and start a new one to show you how to do a little bit more of the reverse shading, focusing on using the black paper as more of your shadows.